Hey, folks.
Hello.
I need to have a virtual background because you can see all that mess behind me.
Only if you're going to stay for the whole time. I love the fact that it's offering to update my drive.
Can someone post the meeting notes link? I'm on a new laptop and I don't have all my favorites. Thank you.
Recorded.
Hey, folks.
Hello.
All right. Looks like we're going to do the updates first. Let's go ahead and get started since we got a packed agenda today. Who wants to kick off the updates for the SIGs specification group going first? And hello, everybody. I think I said that. Okay, who's on the call? Maybe they're not here yet. Melba, do you want to go ahead with a positioning update while you're typing?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I just got the link. I'm on a new laptop, so I didn't have any of the links. The last two sessions, the working session and the actual broader one, we had a brief overview from Microsoft on their new framework. Red Hat also had brought up a discussion in the SLSA specification meeting, which was brought to the positioning about, badging. What does that look like? Where what the progress is. So I think we're going to have someone try to come in to discuss that badging and how it would work. The migration from Google Groups to, I think it's like groups.io or something like that, we were going to try to do, but we don't know how to do it. And we're looking for instructions on how do we migrate, because it is a requirement by end of the year to go from Google Groups to like some, what is it? It says groups.io mailing list. So I'm not sure where we go for that. Additionally, we were talking a little bit more about OSCAL, and trying to make sure that we are in alignment of how we need to change the JSON formatting that I created. And then we just finished the charter. It was just like a few sentences. So I'll have to open up a PR for that. That's pretty much it.
Cool. Yeah, I can make a couple of comments on those things. So just for folks to be aware, yesterday we, as part of the broader software supply chain working group, which SLSA lives under, we did do like a consensus vote for the OpenSSF framework to support that project under the supply chain integrity working group. And that was approved. I think there's still the steps the TAC needs to take to actually ratify the project, but just letting folks know that that happened. The SLSA badging, I think that probably ties in a bit to the discussion we're going to have a bit later today about a SLSA conformance program. So maybe there's some tie-ins there. And then the transition to Google Groups, was that a TAC or a governing board decision?
It was
You're muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So when we set up the calendar invites for the SIGs, someone, I'll have to give you the name later, someone responded from the ops mailing list saying that we had to migrate off of it. So I'm guessing it's an OpenSSF ops person, but I can find the name and put it.
Yeah, I can follow up too. Like if it's, I want to make sure that was actually a TAC or a governing board decision. And then we can work with them to migrate over if needed. Cool. All righty. Any other updates from specification or tooling working group that wants to? I can share my screen too. Sorry.
Yep. So for the specification working group, no major updates, but work has started on the 1.0. You might have seen some pull requests. We are making the draft kind of unpublished changes visible at the URL there. It's also the dev/spec/v 1.0. And there's, if you click on that, there's
the spec.
Yep. There's like a warning banner at the top saying it's unpublished. And also we don't link to it from the main page. Right now, there's no content changes right now. We'll send pull requests to do that. So the process for 1.0 for anyone interested is that we have GitHub issues and like tags and milestones, which I listed in the meeting notes, on issues that we plan to address in either have not yet decided, or we will address in 1.0 or we won't. So that's how we're tracking the work, and we will publish them to that site. Once it's ready for a broader community review, that's when we'll kind of call out for reviews. So if don't worry that you're not seeing every single pull request. We'll kind of do one big review at the end of like the full published thing, and get feedback then. And that's when we'll kind of make it more visible, get feedback, and then finally mark it as final. And also, I just wanted to, in case anyone isn't nuanced in the terminology here, this is just for the levels. I know there's a desire to mark the provenance formats as 1.0 as well, but I think there's just no one who has bandwidth to work on that. That's it for the specification.
Cool. I don't see any tooling things here.
Oh.
Is Michael?
Yeah, I have a couple of sorry. Yeah, I have a couple of small updates. So yeah, we're still looking at some of the OCI stuff that is still planned to be implemented in the new tooling now that the OCI changes were merged in a little while ago, which make certain things like associating a SLSA attestation with an actual image as part of the manifest, which then makes things like, you know, when you download the image, you automatically download the associated attestation, so you could automatically mirror it and whatever, as well as have like references to the individual layers. So if like you could have like a SLSA attestation against like this layer, as opposed to necessarily, you know, the image itself, and that helps out with certain things of, oh, okay, cool, I have a SLSA attestation, but it's only for, you know, the parent image, not for this image. And so there's a bunch of work that's kind of going on that end. There's also some discussions looking through the in some of the GitHub generator work that's getting done around making the GitHub generator a bit more pluggable. And this is also something that I've seen a few different folks do, and we should probably think about how we want to, whether or not we want to kind of push this as a use case for SLSA, or say we're supporting this use case for SLSA, which is some folks are saying like, hey, does it make sense to have SLSA attestations for SBOMs so that I generated an SBOM in this way, and here's the tool that I use to build that SBOM. So it's almost like you're building provenance for additional metadata, or if we don't want to get into that and we want to say, no, SLSA is more for, you know, when we say artifacts, it's more for executable artifacts or whatever. So that's something that's being talked about as well. I tend to lean towards the former of we should just support arbitrary artifacts, but definitely down for and I'm already using it actually for that purpose, but down to hear other people's opinions on that. And then separately, we're still kind of having some discussions with a couple of the different groups, including Maven Central and so on, around how are different folks looking at distributing SLSA attestations along with the package, and how, like, what do those things start to look like? Because for as much as it is possible, we want to at least provide some standardization and some consensus around the processes by which people are doing this, so that when a new, you know, package manager says, hey, we want to support SLSA too, we can point to, you know, folks and say, hey, here's largely how they're doing it, how the community's implementing that feature. So that's pretty much it from the tooling side.
Cool. Is there an issue for the SBOM discussion, or is that just happening in the SIG?
So yeah, that's happening a little bit of out of band. There was a proposal from the Ghost team, the Google open source security team, on that sort of thing. The other thing too is just, this is just kind of an ongoing thing of you know, given that SLSA itself just sort of says it's for artifacts, folks have said, great, I'm building an SBOM, that's an artifact, let me build a SLSA attestation for it. You know, some folks have begun to also do stuff like they separate out SLSA attestations for the packaging of an artifact from the actual compilation of the artifact. I think just we do probably want to have some ideas around, you know, what the use cases are around that and how people should be largely looking at it.
Makes sense.
I would push against creating too fine a granularity of claims. Like, we'd like to support arbitrary different types of content. As to what it maps to from a claims point of view, isn't it a longer term discussion? But going too granular means that the amount of data that we're having to carry around and store and archive for the next 15 years is going to grow and grow and grow. So I would resist against going too far down the rabbit hole here.
Cool. All right. So let's see what's next on the agenda. Any other questions, comments on the updates? All right. Yeah, so the next thing is the OpenSSF supply chain integrity working group. I just mentioned this. Jay, did you want to say anything more?
Yep. Let me just turn the sound on this other meeting. Yeah, around this time I have to do double meetings. I apologize about that. Yeah, exciting times, right? So yesterday we had the vote, and great part is that at the end users working group meeting this morning, they were a little bummed that the supply chain integrity working group got to it first. But that being said, once we go to the TAC with it, and I've already put it on the agenda for Tuesday, it comes in. You know, everyone is going to have a hand in working with this. End users working group actually said that because it's now going to the supply chain integrity working group, that they want to make sure that they bring the members of that working group over to the supply chain integrity working group and to the project, the SSC project, to make sure that everyone is involved and that it's targeting and addresses the right thing from a consumption standpoint, which is great. As I said before, I want SLSA and the SSC, or whatever we end up calling it, because that name is going to change as well, to support its adoption in the Supply Chain Integrity Working Group and support its adoption under the OpenSSF. So that name is going to change. We're going to, we already have a pull request. Microsoft and all the branding that's going to be taken away from it so that it can support a true open fashion and it's working. But we want both of these to march forward, bridged. They're their own separate entities, bridge them together, march them forward. And so these are ongoing discussions that I've already started to have here and in the other, and then the other in the respective SIGs as well. The blog post that I'm currently working on, and Melba, I hate doing this right here, but I'll be getting with Melba and maybe Michael as well, to change focus of that blog post to be more of a joint blog post to talk about this exciting opportunity we have to build something well-rounded. A part one for producer focus for SLSA, a part two for consumption focus for the SSC or whatever we end up calling it, and then the part three for the tools involved. I think that blog post will be fantastic, especially once we bring it in. It'll paint that picture. It's something that we can go to the public with and to the industry with, and I think that'll be more of a compelling and exciting story. I'm willing to get whatever feedback anyone else has on that. But that's what I'm envisioning in my mind, just because I'm trying to push the envelope on us getting to ISO status sooner than later. Right? So I'll pause. I'll stop there. That's my 2 cents. I'm excited about it, and that's the passion.
Cool. Are you all working on like a proof of concept demo of sorts, so we'd see how this would actually work?
Yeah, so Adrian and I have been talking, and I think what we're going to end up doing, we have, so we would like to create some type of a reference architecture of sorts. We also want to create some type of let's say a roadmap, or we want to create some type of a concept on how these two frameworks, and I think there's a conversation with Fresca too, right? I think that's a pending conversation as well. But we want to have some sort of a mapping of where the bridges occur. I don't want to go as far as to address gaps. I think those conversations are those can be had internal to the meetings that we're about to have. But I do want to highlight where SLSA is, or where SLSA is, what that scope is, SSC, where that is, what that scope is, how they bridge together. And I need Melba on this, because Melba's exceptionally good at diagramming and stuff like that, at making pictures look like words, or vice versa, right? I'm not that good at that. But I think that paints a better picture than me just putting words on paper. I think the words on paper is for the blog post that comes of that after the fact, right? So yes, the answer to your question is yes. I'm gonna need some help. Adrian and I are already talking about it, and we're also gonna get a few people, from the inside here to come on over and help out with that as well. Basically, what it's gonna come down to is this is gonna be an all hands type of thing. For the vision that is this, all hands are required. So exciting times, and
Awesome.
plenty of room for everybody plenty of meat for everybody to chew on.
Very cool. All right. Next on the agenda is me. One thing that I discussed with steering committee members is moving this general meeting to a monthly cadence, since we have so many sub meetings happening right now. One comment was brought up that we don't have an APAC friendly time zone. So I pushed, I put a ping in Slack in the mailing list to see if folks from that region would be attending regularly. I didn't get any interest back. Sort of assume no one is on the call today from that time zone. But my point is, if we do get interest and people are looking for a APAC friendly time, we could probably look at alternating the meeting times. A lot of working groups do it this way. And if we do the alternation, then it might make sense to keep this in every other week. So we'd alternate every other week. But yeah, I see a couple of hands up. Melba?
Yeah, so I have a colleague in APAC that would love to be partaking in this, but this is so late for him. So I don't mind helping him, try to get on board and facilitating those every other week discussions if we have a good audience for it.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to gather that info. So if you can maybe have them plus the Slack issue or something, and then we can see what attendance we would have. Michael?
Real quick. So yeah, I reached out to a couple of folks who they might be interested, they might not be interested. It's a little unclear at this point. So I would just say until we get a little bit more interest, we could just, yeah, wait.
Keep the time. Okay. Which then kind of dovetails into another part of my question. I want to open it up for other folks that are interested in kind of helping facilitate this meeting. It's been me, and then I usually ping in Mike or Mark Lodato last minute if I can't make it. So I think some of the SIG leads or other steering committee members, we do like a round robin for folks that can help facilitate. That would be awesome. I guess if you're interested, just toss your name in the doc, and then we can get that going. I think with a monthly cadence, it will be lighter load on us all anyway. So cool. And Mark, you've got the next item.
Yeah, I just want to ask that if there's any volunteers to do more, obviously contributions are even more welcome, but reviewing of pull requests. I think lately a lot of the commits on the repo have like authored by me or reviewed by Joshua Locke. And so I think it's probably healthy to have more people reviewing it. I think even if you look at it and don't have an opinion, just like saying that would be valuable. So if you happen to help, but just kind of spreading the review load around would be good. So if you're interested, like either you could jump in or we could add you to the code owners, which gets people automatically listed as reviewers whenever there's a pull request in a particular area. So like if you're interested, for example, just in the specification or just in the provenance format or something like that, even that would be valuable. So either you could reach out to me or just start doing it or anything like that, but I just want to put out a call.
Is most of the work the spec work, terminology and clarification? And
yeah, right now that's happening. So it's like part of it is actual content. Part of it is like implementation of like, oh, we need a new page that does this. And so I have to write some, the template doesn't work. So I have to change around the liquid templates and make CSS changes, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes there's things like that. If it's helpful, I could split those more out of like implementation changes versus content changes, if that helps people review. If like, usually I just kind of mix them together, like, or like have multiple commits in the pull request, but just then one pull request to not flood people with lots of different reviews. But if we want to change how we do pull requests to make it easier to review, I'm also open to that too.
cool.
But yeah, most of the work happening right now is on the levels spec. Yep.
Cool. Melba says she's happy to help, but needs a 101. I don't know if you can want to give a really quick example.
No, not right now. Not right now.
No, I mean, just a couple minutes. You don't have to. Yeah, just like give us one issue, Mark, and then people can.
Let me see SLSA issues, if there's any open issues right now, or pull requests. I think there's no pull request now, but for example, like here, I'll put in the meeting notes an example pull. if you want to click on that.
Yeah.
And so this one was just creating the 1.0 directory. It doesn't really have any content things, but just adds like the draft banner. So in the top post, I try to like explain a summary of everything. There's always if you scroll down a little bit, like I try to link to it in the first post, but there's always a deploy preview right there that you could click. It might not always be obvious which page has changed, so you might have to change the URL. In this case, you'd have to add a /spec/v1.0. Yep. And then you could see that, and like for example, in this case, I originally had it at the bottom, and I didn't have a dismiss button. And Joshua, who reviewed this, said like, oh, it's probably more visible at the top. So that was like an example of a really useful review. But if you have like opinions on that, like, oh, it wasn't visible, or anything of that sort, or the colors are not readable, or I don't think that will properly, it's like in the way, or it won't properly prevent people from accidentally relying on it or something, anything like that is valuable. So usually that you could do that to view the rendered version. If you hit the files change button, you can view, this one has a lot because I broke it up into a bunch of different commits. The commits tab, actually, not everyone does this, I do this usually, kind of breaks up into smaller chunks of like copy the directory, add the banner, change this CSS, blah, blah, blah. And then you could view individual things. GitHub also has, if you view any particular markdown file on the files change page, probably not here. This pull request maybe doesn't have any markdown file changes. Does it? No, I think this one doesn't actually have any. Oh, yeah, like there's like the little paper icon in the top right of the window will show like a rendered version. It doesn't render exactly the same as the website, but it shows like in green was added, red was removed. And so it could give you like a visual diff.
Did I just do it?
Yeah, yeah. In this case, everything is new, so it's not really a useful
Yeah,
diff, but in other pages, so that could help review as well. And if you're only reviewing partially of like, I only reviewed the content or I only reviewed the implementation, but I don't have an opinion, that even that would be valuable too, and just say it on the comment.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you need help with GitHub, there's lots of GitHub tutorials, how to get through a review.
Yeah. Oh, in case it's not obvious, because it maybe takes a little while, you have to click you go to this tab, and then there's the review changes button on the upper right.
It's there.
If you go to the file, you have to click files changed, and then
right
that
here.
review changes thing, and then you could add a comment. You could also, as you add comments, you could hit them, you could do like start draft, and then it'll send them all in bulk instead of sending like an email for every single one.
Cool. Alrighty. Thanks, Mark. More reviewers, welcome. All right, we got about 30 minutes left, and I'm going to kick it over to Jason Lutz and Tracy Miranda and Joshua that are going to talk through what a SLSA conformance program can look like. I'm not sure, Jason or Tracy, are you sharing?
I'll go ahead and share the screen.
Okay.
All right. So as Kim mentioned, we were tasked to kind of put together some ideas to propose a conformance program and to basically throw those ideas out here. And so everything needs to really be legally reviewed, and we want to throw it out to the community so that some input's in there, but we just wanted to have something basic to start with. And so I'll go ahead and show my slides. And so we're basing this off of another framework that's out there, and we'll talk a little bit about that, so that we're not really reinventing the wheel, but we're basing it off of a pretty popular framework that's out there in the cloud security space, and we'll address those. So Joshua's going to go into what is conformance, and then we'll talk about our proposal.
Yeah, so basically, salsa conformance is the intent is for us to be able to create a program so that organizations can assert their compliance with the salsa framework in a kind of a trustworthy and transparent way that gives consumers and organizations kind of a fair playing field. We propose that we separate this into two tiers almost. So the first would be a way for an organization to self-assert their conformance, so they would assess themselves, and then the second tier would be a third-party certification. So that would be an external audit. Someone would come in and verify their claims, and so with both of these, this would provide we want to provide a public kind of registry or transparency log of the different responses to the framework. So which elements of the requirements an organization meets, and whether or not that is attested just by the organization itself or by the organization and a third-party reviewer. The idea is that that would be available for anyone to be able to review on the SLSA website. And so kind of that leads into the question of who exactly would be able to do these reviews. And obviously, there are probably legal requirements that we're not exactly most capable of answering, but the idea is that firms would be approved to complete SLSA assessments. And so they would provide the standards of evidence laid out by the SLSA framework that are agreed upon by the community, and they would be required to meet those kind of technical and legal requirements in order to be an authorized auditor. And they would be listed on the SLSA website. That is the general idea, so that an organization who wants to get their services could quickly contact them. Obviously, these requirements, we need to kind of work them out and figure out exactly how an auditor would be qualified, but a couple examples could be that they are professionals trained on SLSA or have comparable audit experience. They participate in the community, and they have legal agreements with the Linux Foundation. Those are just a couple of examples of what could allow an audit organization to be considered authorized to do SLSA reviews. And so this is kind of this mirrors very strongly what is going on other places in the industry. And Jason, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. And so I don't mean to blatantly just show the other program, but why not? We're going to reinvent the wheel, but I think this is a great example of how the approach could be done. And again, this is to the community, and it's for the community to decide. But for example, the Cloud Security Alliance has a security trust assurance risk program, the STAR program, in which they give badges basically for the different levels. So as you can see, STAR level 1 would be the self-attestation. So basically they're answering the questions on how they address the control objectives in the framework. So in our case, SLSA, they would just basically answer the questions on how they feel they meet those requirements in the SLSA levels. And then a second level, if we should go forward with this approach, would be allowing those third parties to do audit, and that would give a second level of assurance. There's also some variance with this. They are also trying to introduce continuous assurance. So if an organization has automated monitoring to ensure there's no drift from the compliance, that might be a nuance to the different levels. So anybody's free to go out to the CSA and look. We're not involved with the CSA in any way or promoted that. Again, we're just using this as an example of a framework where the transparency is involved. And so what I'm showing on my screen is, for example, Google GCP is a registrar in the STAR program, and you could see that they have STAR level 1, STAR level 2. You could actually go there and click the listing and see how they responded to the controls framework that the CSA has, which, by the way, is called the Cloud Controls Matrix. And what I'm showing here is the CIQ. If you click on that, it's basically like 300 different questions on how they're addressing the control objectives, and it's transparent and available to the public. Obviously, an organization wouldn't want to put too much detail about how they're meeting these controls. They wouldn't want to list special tools, techniques, and so on, but they would basically outline how they addressed those different levels. I'm sure there's probably a lot of questions about this, but continuing on, there's 1,500 entries in here, so Google, Red Hat, and others have submitted to the STAR registry. So passing it over to Josh, maybe a little bit more detail on the conformance.
Yeah, so basically, we obviously we already have levels in SLSA, so we kind of propose that we have different tiers of conformance to the framework. So tier 1 would be that self-assessment, where the organization goes and fills a spreadsheet, a table of compliance, et cetera, to detail which controls they meet and maybe give some details on how they meet it or potentially why they don't meet it. Or give caveats to their answer. And so tier 1 would be that the self-assessment was completed and it was submitted and it potentially reviewed as a PR, and that would be included in the registry. And so then that second level that Jason was talking about, that continuous monitoring, it could be a second little nuance to tier 1. It could be that the organization also implemented checks, automated checks that run continuously that validate their SLSA level. And we also want to kind of talk about this should, where possible, we want it to be independently verified by the consumer of the build service, wherever possible. So just because you're tier 1 and you don't have a third-party review, where possible, a consumer should be able to verify to some extent this for themselves to give a little bit more trust to it. And then tier 2, obviously would be the audited conformance. So that's where the third party comes in and verifies the claims. And so the evidence wouldn't necessarily be put on the registry, but part of agreements with Linux Foundation or anybody else would be that the evidence needs to be maintained and retained by the third-party auditor. And that would include those some of the same details as tier 1, but it would come with the additional attestation that a third party had reviewed, a trusted third party had reviewed and agreed with the SLSA level. Or if they disagree, show exactly where they do. And again, where possible, should be independently verifiable by the consumer. That's kind of the two levels, the two tiers that we're thinking of for this conformance program.
Yeah, and so just giving an example of maybe what a self-attestation would look like from an organization about how they're delivering software. So the very first requirement from SLSA, version controlled, every change to the source is tracked in version control. So an organization might respond, company XYZ utilize the Git-based distribution code repository for all code. The implementation is configured to best security practices as defined by a third-party vendor, and so on. So you could see that it would just be a high-level discussion on how they're addressing the SLSA controls that are listed. So this is just a screenshot kind of showing what response from an organization about their software delivery methods, how they meet SLSA.
Jason,
so I do see.
Oh,
yep.
Sorry. I thought you were in a pause. Isaac's had his hand up for a little while. I just wanted to catch that.
That's exactly what I was doing. I was going to say, I do see some hands up. So
we're on the same page.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I'll wait. No apologies.
Oh no, I was just going to bring it to the next slide, which we'll talk about the document. But yeah, Isaac, go ahead.
So I think one of the looking at this, some foundational thinking laid out. One of the things that I'm not clear on in this framework is to what the certification, as it were, is attaching. Are we certifying people who make builders? Like, are we going to come in and say, hey, someone has certified the GitHub Actions-based builder or GitHub reusable workflows as a tool? Or are we certifying an artifact to say the artifact, yes, we looked at how this artifact was generated and we think it solves level 3? Or are we certifying a supplier of software and their practices? Or are we certifying a project which may belong to a supplier and from which many artifacts may come? Like, do you have a thought on kind of at what level or to what entity these conformance certifications attach?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. And Josh, if you'd like to address that. So yeah, I agree. The scoping would be an issue that we would have to address with the community, but I would think that somebody that wants to attest that they're doing SLSA would scope it down to the various levels that you had mentioned. So whether it's in their secure software delivery or what they're doing in their pipelines. So yeah, that is definitely an issue that would need to be addressed as far as the scoping.
Jason, if I can jump in and
Sure.
just add, like with what we've seen with Kubernetes and other things, it's typically at the level of the tool or framework.
I know it should be, the idea is that it should be as flexible as possible, right? Because a lot of organizations not only use a third-party tool, but they add customizations on top of that as part of their build pipeline. So if you're a company that supplies software and has a lot of heavily customized build pipeline, you should be capable of executing this as well. So it's obviously it's good for the tool to be compliant, but as I'm sure we've all seen, build pipelines are varied and numerous in a lot of cases. So it would be down to probably I was thinking the organization that supplies software and the build service, and basically anyone who would see value from attesting to SLSA compliance should have the capability to access this conformance program to some extent. But obviously scoping of which things are applicable to which types of organizations will be a detail that we'll need to kind of work through as time goes on, because not everything will be applicable to every type of organization based on what they do exactly.
I think you're right. Apart from characterizing it as a detail, it sounds fairly fundamental to the shape and definition of this program and the scope and feasibility of it. And so I think, I think even at this level, at these slides, I would want to see clarity on, wait, what is it we're certifying? Are we certifying builders or tool chains or practices or organizations or artifacts or projects or repos? Or there's such a broad view, and any one of these could be applicable, to be clear. Any one of these we may want to go, yeah, we want to certify this set of practices that this organization uses to generate this artifact from this repo. But I think even at this high level, I think we should have an idea about what it is this program is certifying, like who is it who owns the certification at the end of the day, and to what does that attach, and then the processes to support that will be the details that flow from there. But it feels fairly high on the decision tree in terms of a program like this to, are we certifying builders or tools or companies or suppliers or repos, or if you see what I mean. And so the example that you gave on the slide had the certification about a source requirement. That's out of scope of kind of the machine attestations that are generated on provenance today. And so it seems that there's something around a SLSA VSA here, which would talk about the overall set of requirements, whereas provenance, which is where we've been focused today, is just build and provenance set of requirements and doesn't speak to source. So I guess what I'm saying is, I love this line of thinking you've got here. I think this doc seems, the slides seem on target from a high level, but it's missing this crucial thing. And I don't think it's a detail. I think it's fairly fundamental to how we approach it.
Yeah, that's great input. Awesome. Yeah, and we'll throw it out to the community. That's really the intent. So that would be a task that we would need to address. Thank you. Aaron, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was gonna, so Isaac, you're spot on around, like what is the scope of the thing that's being certified here. I mean, right in the meeting 2 or 3 meetings back, I guess I did a self audit of the SLSA level 2, right, on my own, and kind of showed how I'm meeting those SLSA level 2 levels. That doesn't represent every single artifact coming out of my organization though, right? So like it is the scope of like, what is that thing? And I think this topic is crucial, for building trust. And Isaac, I know you have a pretty cool PowerPoint you shared in the tooling meeting a couple of meetings back, like how do we trust these different things? So yeah, I'm just underscoring that. The question I do have for you guys, like from a CSA certification perspective, you're kind of showing that as an example. How do they do the scoping there, right? Because that would be an interesting experiment to understand.
Yeah, I would say that the CSA has a cloud controls matrix framework, and so it would be up to each individual organization on how they're applying that framework to their cloud program. So the way I've seen it is you could scope it to a particular area that you've done your cloud program, but usually it's for like SaaS providers to prove that they're doing what they say they're doing. And there's another document called the CIQ, which is a questionnaire that allows questions to be answered. And so you could deep dive into that. So it really depends on what the organization is trying to attest to. So usually with the CSA, it's around the whole cloud security program, and it goes outside of just the cloud. You would use something like the CIS benchmarks if you were just saying, hey, I'm doing GCP or AWS, but this is more around the whole organization. HR is even included, application security, and so on. So
Gotcha.
Usually it's around the SaaS that they're providing.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, thanks for presenting. I think this is really great. I think it's really exciting. Two comments. One on to follow up on Isaac's scoping question. I would imagine, like part of the SLSA, one thing I want to address in 1.0 and explain it concretely in 1.0 is that the main idea of SLSA is that you don't have to do this review on every single piece of software you develop, but instead you just trust a small number of build services, SaaS, and do this type of audit certification on them, and everything produced by them we could automatically verify. And so you would tie it back to like, okay, which are the things that services you trust, and you gain trust through this type of process that you just described. And then we can automatically verify through provenance and other controls that like all the stuff being spit out of that meets a certain level. And so I would imagine that's how we'd want to position this. I imagine it also depends on like whether it's open versus closed source, and also like whether you're delivering software versus actually a service. Because if you think about something like open source, you would just say, well, this package came out of whatever builder, whatever builder has this certification done. If you're getting closed source software, you probably need an additional certification that they're actually using the builder that was certified, and like their internal processes followed. And then I think a step further would be like SaaS itself, of like, let's say, like I'll use my own company as an example, like you use Google Cloud or whatever, some certification that all of the software running has met this SLSA process, which in turn have been built on SLSA compliant build services internally. That's something I think that SLSA we haven't gotten into yet, of like certifying services versus software. But yeah, this whole framework seems really good to me. One more comment. This is completely in line with what we had proposed for 1.0, where we're moving away from this common requirements and making maybe that more just like suggestions, and having it be like a explanation of why you meet this. What you presented here is like a much better version of that, of what we had proposed. And so like, I think we should develop we should work together and do this in parallel as far as 1.0 goes, because like I feel like this should be like not just like an add-on, but a first-class property of the specification, and we should develop like the self-attestation form or whatever, and design the specification with that in mind. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, no. So echo a lot of Mark's feedback as well. I think the areas I know that we're kind of interested in is sort of diving into what is the difference between the open source and closed source stuff, right? Because a closed source, a company, right, like that's running, I don't know, Jenkins internally, but they are potentially doing all the right things and securing everything and whatnot, might be sort of generating that. And then there's also still, and this is sort of more open for the specification, which is like some of these SLSA requirements are potentially things that individual projects do as opposed to the builder itself. And so making clear, I think, some of that distinction would be useful, because it's like, obviously, if you're certifying a builder, you can only certify what the builder's actually doing, whereas the project can certify, like, I'm, using this builder in a correct way, and these are my additional sorts of things that are true about my project that kind of take it to that next level or whatever.
Yep. I'm definitely seeing a lot of issues about the scoping of that. Yeah. Tracy? Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good discussion, and maybe I wanted to introduce the kind of process side, because like, this is what it takes to get to the conformance. We need to have these conversations and work as a community to work out the nitty-gritty. And it sounds like the specification working group might be the right home to say that's where the conformance program should evolve. And like, from a process side, I want to highlight a couple of things. Like, ultimately, we need a proposal that would go to the OpenSSF board, who would have to approve kind of the overall conformance program, because it's overseen by OpenSSF. And then there's just a bunch of decisions to be made, like, are you certifying against a specific version? How long does it last? What is the language we use? What is the branding? What is the logo you get? So all these things need to be discussed in an open, vendor neutral group and kind of slowly work through.
And we do have, can you open that document real quick, Jason? Because I think it touches a little bit on what you were asking there.
Absolutely. Let me jump into that. So here we go. I should be sharing.
So this is the kind of proposal document that includes more details on what the PowerPoint or the slide deck kind of showed. And if you scroll down, you can see, like, we have an example of what a badge could look like. Obviously, all of this is draft, and so I think this would be a great place for us to start, and it can move to wherever it needs to live to be most effective for anybody, whatever working group is most appropriate. But we'd love to start getting feedback. And in this doc, I think Jason can, here, I can change it to comment. There we go. Yeah, so we'd love to get feedback in this doc to start kind of working through some of these things that obviously we didn't see, like the scoping issue, and obviously legal review will have to come at some point, because it deals with trademark and licensing and all that jazz. So yeah, so if the specification group is the right place for this to start being kind of hammered out, I think that would be great for us to get this in there and kind of discuss on a more detailed point. And if we could get feedback before that happens, that'd be great, so we could discuss specific topics.
Yeah, and I do see some questions about whether a slide link is available, or we can edit this document. Yeah, we need to put these in the right spot. For right now, Josh and I were just working together on getting this together. So yeah, this needs to be put into the right area where everybody can access and edit, should this go forward. So.
Yep, so I've just marked both of this document and the presentation as commenter, so anyone with the link can comment. The link to the presentation is in the document, and the document is in the meeting notes. So anyone can comment kind of through that chain if they'd like. So
Awesome.
In terms of like what SIG to put this in, I think I wonder if it makes, well, there's at least kind of two parts here. One is the actual survey and what questions and like those kind of details and what the assessment does. I think that clearly goes in the specification because it goes hand in hand with what the requirements are. So that part, definitely. The process question around that is less, I don't know, folks, should we just put it all in the specification SIG as well? It's kind of almost like half positioning, half specification. I don't know, Mike.
Well, and to also throw another wrench in the works, like once I think the process is all spun up, there's most likely going to be work on the tooling group to say, hey, here are automated assessments as well. But I think, like, from what it sounds like, it probably, just my 2 cents is this initial piece probably goes through the specification group. Then as we kind of start to vocalize it through with the outside world, it probably is going to go and open up also to the positioning group. And then once everything's sorted out, it would probably go into like, any automated tooling would probably come out of the tooling group.
Yeah, so maybe saying starting in the specification group till we have a proposal that's been approved, and then it can be implemented where it makes sense. Sounds good.
Okay, so it sounds like we're headed in the right direction. Thank you guys for letting us present. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Melba?
thanks everybody.
Melba, did you
I think she's doing a little clap.
Oh, okay. So if Kim's still on, I pass it back to her.
So Kim had to hop off. She actually just pinged me to see if I take us out. So we have 5 more minutes. Are there any other topics anybody wanted to bring up? Otherwise, we can end it 5 minutes early. All right. Okay. See you all at the group meetings and then in a month otherwise.
Sounds great.
Bye.
See you guys.